thank you for joining us for this panel. It's an intimate one. We're actually one panelist shy, and we'll talk about that because we are doing a kind of tech-oriented panel, but one that I think shows a very relevant technology for today's problems out there. So the title, as you can see, creating trust across digital systems, and I would venture. Let me kick this off by saying the world that we live in has really changed, guys. Whether we realize it or not, as of like a year ago, pre-open AI, as of a day ago, kind of like some things happened in the last day. We're in a completely different situation, and it's going to be changing more rapidly than any of us can probably really think about and envision. And I think the tools that are going to, there's a set of tools out there that have been propagated within Web3 and also have tremendous potential just anywhere in the digital domain related to cryptography that really matter, and really matter for where we are right now. So in this panel, you have a bunch of ZK cryptography people, or people that run companies within the ZK cryptography space, and we'll talk about that. So I know that this is an institutional event, so institutions have different things that they're looking for, but ultimately, solving some of, or working on some of society's problems should be interesting for everyone, institution or not. So we're gonna get into that. So I'm Rob Viglione. I run a company called Horizon Labs, and we've been in crypto or this ZK cryptography part of Web3 since basically the beginning, and that was in 2017. We kicked off a project. It was the third project in this segment of the industry that's now much more relevant for where we're going in Web3. So we have a little bit of pedigree, but in particular, we work on a couple of different Web3 platforms and a technology that we're looking to extend way outside of Web3. In fact, my hypothesis is that ZK is going to actually be the big link between Web3 and Web2, or Web3 and everything else, whether it's Web2, Web4, or whatever comes next, because it's based on cryptography. And in a world where the marginal cost of content creation is basically zero now, in a world where we are having a hard time deciding whether some piece of digital content that we see is real or not, cryptography can come to the rescue in some of those use cases. So anyway, I'm really proud to be here. I'll introduce some of our other panelists, and Jemma, if you'd like to maybe give a quick background of yourself and Singularity.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Great to be in New York. I'm from Sydney, Australia. So I've been in crypto since 2017. I'm not a cryptographer. I come from a background in traditional finance. So up until 2023, I've been mostly investing as an angel investor in this space. The genesis of Singularity actually came out of my own needs as a very active DeFi degen, but looking at transacting on chain and realizing that the difficulties of obfuscating my own transactions, of wallet hygiene, was enough of a pain point, right? And to eventually create what is now Singularity. So Singularity is a compliant and decentralized privacy infrastructure, where at the core it's a decentralized dark pool. Right, so just like in TradFi, dark pools, you trade blocks, it's very centralized. And the idea is to build a decentralized version where it's trustless, where it's non-custodial, and it's truly dark, right? So where the owners of the dark pool cannot see the orders either. We've been around for 18 months, and I've known Rob for probably as long as I've been in this space, back in Zencash days, and we'll be doing a few things with ZK Verify as well.
Hi everybody, I'm Stasia Carson. I'm co-founder and CEO of Sindri. I think that we probably share a lot in terms of commonalities on background. Prior to Sindri, I actually spent about a decade in the private credit and corp investment world at a large Japanese financial conglomerate. And I think what really intrigued my interest as it related to ZK was the privacy element was definitely very powerful, but fundamentally the ability to transform data, whether that data is residing in these very protective and closed environments or outside of local networks, and turning it into something that's very portable and hyper shareable across domains. And that enables a lot of different use cases that are interesting to the audience, I think, today, where we can like open up financial institutions and share that data, especially where like natural motivations and incentives reside, all the way towards making sure that the systems that we're using today are very we're able to interface with those systems in a trustless fashion. So we founded Sindri to sort of help drive accessibility, make the tooling around generating these proofs and providing infrastructure incredibly easy via an API, and can share more about that as we continue our conversation.
All right, well, I wanted to kick it off with probably the elephant in the room, which is, what is a ZK proof? Why don't we get that out of the way? Because maybe not everyone's deep in the cryptography weeds here. So who wants to take, what's a ZK proof, and why does it matter?
I mean, I answer this question a lot because I'm not a cryptographer either, but I think that the best way to conceptualize it is to be able to prove some correctness in a message or a piece of data without having to disclose anything other than whether or not that piece of data is true or false. And like that's a very like small snippet, but it helps provide this mental model as to like the transformations that ZK can really drive, right? So if I can prove that I have some accreditation, let's say I've passed through some KYC process, or I have some level of AUM, but I want to also be able to benefit from some level of selective disclosure, I can essentially attest that I have these properties without having to necessarily disclose all the ancillary auxiliary data alongside of it. So that's how I conceptualize it. And again, why I like really want to drive home making data portable and shareable is something that has never been able to be done before without having some sort of trust intermediary. And that's why ZK essentially opens up like a bunch in terms of the design space to really make and mobilize data and make this world a lot more interconnected.
I think that's a really good summary of, as a layman as well, right? When I first learned about ZK, it's exactly right. It's proving that you're 18 years old without having to show every other piece of data about yourself. In trading, for us, in our specific case, is proving that you own a particular asset in a dark pool without telling everyone, what the asset is or what the wallet address is, etc. So I think, when I came across that a few years ago, I think it's probably one of the most powerful technology pieces that I've learned.
So I heard a panelist in the panel just before we got up here said that he thinks that one of the reasons that, one of the things holding back Web3 from more mass adoption is lack of privacy. I could not agree more. In fact, my organization, I kind of jumped into the panel without really even talking about the projects we've worked on, but the first thing that we launched back in 2017 was actually a privacy coin. This was back in the day when ZK as a piece of technology was first being applied into Web3, and we were just so gung-ho about it, of wow, this solves a big problem, that in the early days of Bitcoin, we realized that Bitcoin is not actually anonymous for as much as people might think, that you're kind of hiding or obfuscating your activity. It's just pseudonymous, which means that as soon as an identity can be correlated to a human being, everything you've ever done on chain is visible to the entire world, right? Forever. And this was, it seemed intuitively like a bit of a problem. So we ran out there, we launched this cryptocurrency that was, a privacy coin so that people can actually hide their transaction flows. This was in a very idealistic part of my life, I would say. I'm still idealistic, guys. But we realized that there's actually, many other problems with doing that. So now that link of like this technology, we realize really matters. ZK and privacy preservation is really important whenever you're dealing with something like a public database, which is literally what a blockchain is. So in a world where you're publishing information just kind of out there for the world to see, you really need privacy. But blending that, or where that intersects with the real world beyond the crypto world, is things like, okay, well, we need to know who people are for regulatory purposes, for compliance, for making sure that bad things don't happen with these transaction flows. So that's where we are now, I think, and why I'm really excited for kind of doubling down on this industry. Now my company is launching a project called ZK Verify, which tackles part of the value chain for making this technology really scale to get out there. But the projects that these guys are working on are also part of that story about the time being right for ZK, to either really proliferate Web3 or to start spilling over into the rest of the non-Web3 world. So maybe let's kick it off because there's a lot of investors here. There's a lot of financial institutions present here. So I think that going from the world of degens and crypto with trading to getting financial institutions to do more than just buy and hold Bitcoin. We have this thing called DeFi, decentralized finance, and I think that one of the key missing links there thus far has been actually privacy preservation for online order flow, for identities, and this is exactly what Singularity and Jemma and her team are working on. So Jemma, why don't you share a little bit more about just kind of your experience, not like personally with launching the company, but where are you guys going? How do you see Singularity playing a role in scaling into the financial world?
Sure. So no, stepping back, right? So what's privacy? So we think privacy is a sort of a two-tiered. One is privacy of your wallet address, right? So obfuscating your wallet address so people don't know that, this is Rob's address or this is Gemma's address or Goldman Sachs address. And there are lots of, software out there, Nansen, Arkham, who can actually do that very well in tracking these addresses. And the other side is obfuscating transactional data, right? So obfuscating what you're buying, what you're selling, the size, the asset type, and the price, and when you're doing it. So what Singularity tries to achieve is firstly obfuscating wallet addresses so that, let's say if you go through us and then go to an AMM like a Uniswap or a Curve, your address don't come up. What comes up is our contract address, right? Is the interface that's doing these actions, doing the swaps, doing the liquidity provisioning in these DeFi pools. And then our next product, which is the fully functional dark pool, the order book dark pool, where the transactions will be settled within our contract, right, which is a set of ZK circuits. That's where we'll be obfuscating the transactional level data, right? So that, let's say if you do a swap with a counterparty in Singularity, the transaction will not come up on chain, even though the settlement is on chain. So you can actually verify and decrypt it with your own private node, but that's only because you can do it yourself, but no one else can do it, right? So what comes up on chain is just that a swap has happened, but there's no detail of the swap, right? You don't know what price you did it, when you did it, what asset, and the amount. And we think that's a very powerful tool, particularly if you're trading long tail assets. That's that the size maybe can move the market, or you want to do particular block trades with certain counterparties and not others, right? So that's sort of where we see the future of on-chain trading is, and then on the compliant part is you have to KYC, right? I'm sure most people here know about Tornado Cash and what happened in 2022 was sanctioned. For us, the problem is not the product. The problem is the user, right? You can want privacy, but still be regulatory compliant. We don't see that as mutually exclusive, and so that's where all our users have to KYC. Just like all they want is commercial privacy or commercial confidentiality, but not to be private, say, from the regulators.
So there's a couple of themes that I just want to emphasize today of what we're getting at. So one is, and this is what I believe, for finance to go on chain, you need privacy, hands down. So that's going to happen. It's just a matter of how's it going to happen. And this class of technology and the type of products that Jemma and her team are building are absolutely part of that story. There's another part of the story that I want to emphasize today is the time is now for ZK. And by that, I mean, going back to this idea of a value chain of basically, you have to have something worthwhile to prove, right? That's going into the public domain, and then you have to have a way to prove it. So you need to generate a cryptographic proof. Then, and there are tools around that have not been easy, because when we launched, Zen back in 2017, we literally wrote kind of a custom circuit for that type of thing in kind of cryptography speak, which was not very efficient, and it was really difficult to do things back then. But now there's a whole variety of technologies and products and infrastructure that's coming to market, already has come to market, or is hitting the market into production over the next year. So my prediction is you're going to see this big escalation fast of ZK being used out in the real world, in Web3, and out in the real world. Now, what Stacey and his team are doing with Sindri are also a big part of that story on the value chain. And this is where it's got to be way easier for developers and for companies to be able to create the circuits and integrate them into their products to make it useful. So Stacey, please, if you can share some of that story for you and how you're looking at it.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of what you both said is exactly right. And in order for ZK to be more approachable, it starts with being like highly consumable by the end user. And in this case, we're talking about sort of commercial and financial institutions. And so what Sindri is solving for these financial institutions is we provide an enterprise caliber API that allows for these organizations to build ZK into existing systems. And so a lot of people in the space think of us similar to Stripe in the sense that Stripe was able to take what was otherwise a very closed, messy, complex infrastructure chain and turn that into a few lines of code. We're similarly very obsessed with driving UX and accessibility in a way that transforms the heavy lift of having to integrate ZK infrastructure and doing that in a way that is approachable and accessible via an API. What this allows our enterprise customers to do and financial institution partners is one, start to embed naturally ZK into KYC workflows. Two, introduce new product offerings that anchor around selective disclosure, shielded assets, and lastly, integrate privacy along various portions of their stack. And I think that this is really pressing today. And Rob, you mentioned that the time is now. If we were to sort of triangulate why that is because institutions pretty much lack the ability to scale trust and verifiability to the degree that one, the end customer requires, and two, the internal institution itself requires to make like blockchains and digital marketplaces a real thing. In doing so, they're missing out on billions of dollars worth of value creation and revenue generation. And so when you think about like the cost ROI here, it's pretty significant. But what needs to happen is it needs to be more approachable, more accessible, and that's literally what we do every day is work to build this in an enterprise caliber way that meets the consumption model that enterprises want to build with and meet the stringent standards. So we don't require that data leaves the environment where that data resides. We're portable, so we can be ported into existing systems. And we're also blockchain agnostic. So while a lot of what we're talking about here has to do with digital blockchain environments, it's by no means a prerequisite to use Sindri because there are other motions that it can be leveraged in. So I think that answers the question to a degree, but we're very excited about the opportunities and the conversations that we're having in the commercial realm, just given the power and the transformation that ZK really provides.
All right, so we have about 5 minutes left, guys. So what I'd like to do is to get more into the predictions and where we see the world going. I think that's sometimes one of the best value that you can get coming in, sitting in on a panel, right? Like, what do people in this part of the industry with this cross-section of information see for the future? We could be wrong, for sure. So I'll say two things. On my end, I think that we're going to move towards a world where there are cryptographic proofs generated everywhere, always. So our CTO over here sitting, thank you, Zane, for giving me the idea, actually talks about kind of continuous proof creation just everywhere. And this could be in your vehicle while you're driving, and there could be proofs generated constantly. They could be feeding to insurance systems, all privacy preserving. You could have proofs generated literally with every digital interaction you have. Every ad served to you from an ad server platform could have a cryptographic proof on it to make sure that it is preventing click fraud. There's literally going to be hundreds of millions of proofs that are being generated today, to billions of proofs that will be generated tomorrow, to hundreds of billions and trillions of proofs that are generated continuously. So the value chain of this really matters, guys. And understanding that value chain and digging deeper is really what we do for a living. We're placing bets as entrepreneurs on different parts of the value chain. So ZK Verify, we're fortunate enough to work with both of these teams right here, and that's why we're presenting together, because we represent different parts of the value chain. You've got the application part of the value chain applied to, I think, one of the most important aspects of what we're doing in Web3 with DeFi. And you've got tools for actually creating and integrating ability to make ZK proofs simple and seamless so that the rest of the world can start generating them everywhere and embedding these things into systems everywhere. whether they're corporate systems that exist today, ad servers, vehicles, your favorite online gambling app, whatever it is, there will be proofs everywhere, guys. ZK Verify is set up to be a universal verification layer. Like, our goal and the bet that we're making is that we're going to gobble up a big chunk of that market of a public verification layer that any proof anywhere, generated anywhere of any type, can hit our layer and be basically seamlessly processed for like literally as efficiently as you possibly can. And that result could be used anywhere. So anyway, this is our vision of the world, of where we see it going. And that's going to happen fast. And again, like post OpenAI, and hopefully you guys are all obsessed with these LLMs that are out there, like all of these things are going to be generating content with zero marginal cost. You're just going to have this massive explosion that will require cryptographic proofs everywhere. So what I recommend is look at this value chain, the different parts of it, from the applications to the tools to the ecosystems that are exploding around it, and think about where you can also participate and add value. So that's my prediction for where we're going. But Jemma, maybe you can give some of your thoughts.
I think, Rob, you got it really bang on, right? Like, it's just proving everything that, like continuous proofs. But I think specifically to DeFi and to these institutional use cases, it's really, for me, I think it's one is ID proving, right? So you can proving who you are, proving a test certain trades without showing all the information, right? And also it comes, that sort of links into regulatory and compliance. Again, it goes back to our view that being compliant and being a good person and showing you're a good person is not exclusive, is not mutually exclusive to wanting privacy. I think a lot of people in the current world today think that's it's one or the other, but we definitely don't think so. And then going to so what we see is, so how does that that this mass adoption of proofs, we do see there's still quite a bit of hurdles, and I think that's one of the key things is with proving times, proving costs. It is expensive to generate proofs at the moment, and I think that's why one of the valuable things that ZK Verify is doing is to actually reduce those costs, right? And from a user perspective, right? When I do a trade, when I do something on chain, I don't want to be sitting around, for a few minutes waiting for the proof to happen and to verify, and then I can complete the trade. So I think as that part of technology develops, we'll see an exponential growth in adoption with reduced costs and reduced proving times.
The fun part about being at our part of the stack where Sindri resides is we get to integrate with really cool platforms and see sort of the proliferation of all of these use cases. One use case in particular that I'm super excited to be supporting is with a big cloud provider around the notion of verified credentials, which has a lot of overlap with the things that were mentioned earlier, but essentially self-sovereignty over your digital identity. And the reason why is because there's a lot of just tailwinds that are driving this to be sort of the next iteration of GDPR. And in order for that to exist, we do have to have tooling that is open and accessible, and we do have to have just the general institutional knowledge about how to implement this. But we think that like the verified credential path, being able to verify proof of personhood across the internet and take that identity with you wherever you go, is probably one of the things that will be driven mostly by regulatory inertia. And so therefore, I think that that's probably one of the spaces that we'll see probably some of the most innovation and most excitement coming out of over the next year or so.
Well, guys, we're ending exactly on time, which is awesome. And we'll be around. So please come, meet some of the awesome panelists here and bring your questions and ideas. We'd love to hear them. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.